everybody. Welcome back to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. With me, as always, today, Mr. Cullen McFader.
Hello, hello.
And I, myself, Mr. Clark Coffey, are here today for episode 29. And I'm a little scared, but mostly I'm really excited about this episode, Cullen. And you know why? Because this episode, I feel like, is a big pivot point. And I hope that we don't upset people out there. I hope people will continue to take this journey with us. But with this episode, we're going to kind of open up the scope of what this podcast covers. In the past episodes, the previous 28, we have, for the most part, we stuck to script. It was like, this is a Soldiers of Cinema podcast. Of course, we got that title from Werner Herzog, an inspiration to both of us, and we went through all of his masterclass lessons, and then we started going through his filmography, and so it's been really narrowly focused to Herzog. But you and I, we've kind of talked about it. We're almost 30 episodes in, and we thought it would really be interesting if we could open up, expand our horizons, and take in some other cinema subjects. And so that's exactly what we're going to do here. So with this episode, we're going to pivot to, of all people, Spielberg.
Yeah, which is arguably, it's such a funny comparison to go from Herzog to Spielberg, because they're such different filmmakers, both content-wise and
right.
I would say their personas, their public personas are so
different,
almost the polar opposites when it comes to I guess popular filmmakers.
For sure. So it seems like a stretch, but I think that we're still who we are. Herzog is still so much a part of what informs our philosophies on film, and so I think the lens through which we approach all of this is going to be really similar, though. And I think we'll be surprised at the similarities. But we thought it would be a good idea to explore being able to stretch out just past that limited kind of narrow range of content. And that's not to say also, by the way, that we're not ever going to go back and revisit any more of Herzog's filmography. I don't think that's going to be the case at all.
No.
And as a matter of fact, this may even actually open up, give us the flexibility to examine his work in other more, interesting ways where we can actually compare him to other directors. We can contrast and compare more from a wider range of films and filmmakers. So I'm excited. Like I said, a tad scared. I hope people will continue to take this journey with us in spite of this change. But I think it's going to be a good one. And
at the end of the day, the Soldiers of Cinema podcast is. We're the soldiers here. We're driving the ship.
There you go.
But I think it'll be interesting. I think again, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't strip away the. I do. I am a captain. But
you drive. No, but wait. But is it called driving a ship, or is it?
I don't know. Steering, helmsman. I don't know. Anyway, but I think that the what's important is that it's still, because of how influenced we both are of Herzog. The analysis that we're going to do is the same. It's the same type of analysis. It's the same conversations that we would have about a Herzog movie. But, why limit ourselves?
There you go. Absolutely.
So
without further ado then. So we are going to be discussing Steven Spielberg. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't need any introduction for any of you out there.
A little-known filmmaker.
A little-known filmmaker. I think, it's as Cullen and I discussed, in our last episode, he was the first person that I ever even knew who was a director. Even as a young child. I think before I even knew what the position was or what they did, it was like Spielberg was the embodiment of this is a person who makes a film when I was a kid.
And I've had many influences, I still do, but I would say if there was one person throughout my entire life, especially in my youth, who was like the total influence of why I wanted to make movies, it would very easily go to Spielberg. I remember, just a quick aside, I remember being probably 4 years old, and my mom asked me what I wanted to do because it was like this kindergarten assignment where we had to write down what our dream jobs were. And I said, Steven Spielberg. And she said, okay, so you want to direct movies? And I said, no, I want to be Steven Spielberg. I don't want to be a director. I want to be him.
And well, and I'm pretty sure that I had some similar type moments, when I was a kid. So definitely a big inspiration
Yes,
for both of us.
And I think forever, like for so many filmmakers,
for so many
that,
people, right? Even if you've never had a desire or an interest in making film, I mean, I think his films have had such an impact, on such a wide audience. I mean, Herzog clearly is a landmark filmmaker, but let's be honest here. His work is somewhat niche. For the when you compare that to Steven Spielberg's work and the audience that Spielberg has found, I mean, Herzog it doesn't even come close.
Yeah.
Spielberg basically, and we're going to talk about this. I mean, he, with Lucas, ushered in the era of blockbusters, and for better or worse, the extrapolation of that is kind of what we have here to some degree with Marvel movies and
cinema today.
Cinema today. So,
and as we get into
cinema today, if you're Scorsese, but
but as we get into it too, I think it's really important to note as well that we're trying not to repeat any steps. Like, we don't want to just make the analysis of Spielberg something that everyone's heard before. And so with the two movies that we've chosen to watch, which is Duel and E.T., we're trying to take a look at those from a lens of, how did Hollywood change? What was the context of Hollywood at the time? And, even just going in the analysis of those movies on their own, like, we want to look at things like what are the themes that a lot of people, Duel isn't just a car chase movie. How do we examine these movies much in the way that we would have examined Herzog's? So
for sure.
Trying not to tread over, already had conversations.
Well, let's not make promises that we can't keep, Cullen. I don't know. There's only 12 notes a man can play. But yeah, so you're right. So let's talk about the two films though that we're going to kind of use for the focus of this discussion. We've got Duel, which was released in 1971, and I guess it was aired in 1971 actually, because it was a made-for-TV movie. And you're the resident Spielberg scholar, so you can come in whenever we need all the trivia and kind of facts. But right, I mean, Spielberg was 25 when he made this film, so quite young. He had done quite a bit of television, and this is still for television, but this was the first feature-length project he'd ever shot. Is that correct?
Yeah, he directed some shorter,
TV shows,
episodes, or just came in for like certain pickups and things like that. But this was the first time he ever got to kind of helm a movie himself.
Right.
Shot in 12 days, which I think is kind of amazing.
All on location.
And not for Spielberg's speedy schedule, but rather because the movie had pretty much no money behind it. It was quite literally supposed to just be an ABC movie of the week.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think it's kind of remarkable that it blew up to anything more than that, and really is kind of a testament to the skill and the craft of Spielberg himself.
Yeah.
But I also think that it was one thing that's always interested me a lot too, and that you were just talking about this before we were recording, was that the idea that the studio was really kind of gunning down on him to make this probably not something that wouldn't have been nearly as special as it would have been had the decisions Spielberg wanted to make not come to fruition. And one of those being that they wanted the entire movie to be pretty much shot like on a soundstage with just real projection and very much a more formal like kind of style of directing a movie like this, very much more low budget,
a lot more what you'd
safer.
find, more what you'd find in older films or
TV,
TV, absolutely. Because they were terrified, frankly, that with this budget and this few days, that how could he possibly get all this shot?
Yeah, this 25-year-old kid. Yeah,
it's just tough. It's because everything takes place. We're inside cars. We've got mounts on cars. There's stunts. There's all this kind of stuff. And with 12 days, that's just extremely difficult to do that. But there's an interesting story there. So. Spielberg tells the story, and and this always kind of blows me away. I mean, the confidence that some people have at such a young age. I'm like, God, I wish I had that. But Spielberg, when the studio said, "Hey, you're going to have to shoot all the inside car stuff process, so that we can get this done in time," he said, that's going to ruin the film. It's going to completely take people out of the reality here. So he said, let me do it. I know I can get it done. And the studio said, okay, well, look, here's what we'll do. You spend the first half day out there shooting plates so that you've got them. And then we'll give you like 3 days. And if you're on track, if it looks like you're going to make it, then we'll let you keep shooting on location. But if it's not, we're going to pull you back in, and we've got those plates, and we're going to use them for these process shots. But obviously, he was able to pull it off. But amazing, yeah, amazing. And it's interesting too. You and I were talking about this, and it's something that we really want to make a big part of this discussion. The landscape, of film. Yeah. When this film was released, because these two films were released 11 years apart, Duel and E.T., but boy, they couldn't have been released in a more radically different film environment. And, a lot of this change was actually brought about by Spielberg himself, especially if you take Spielberg and Lucas as a team. Spielberg actually changed, the industry, not single-handedly, of course, but he was a big part of that. And so when Duel was released in 1971, we have what I think is one of the greatest eras of cinema, which is, some people call it New Hollywood or American New Wave or Hollywood Renaissance. But this is, my favorite era of film, all told. But Duel comes out just a few years into this. I think, you can kind of use like Bonnie and Clyde or Easy Rider,
68 kind
67,
of thing.
68 as kind of the beginning of this era. But we have a major departure here for the types of films that are getting theatrical release and are finding an audience. And I think it's interesting to note that, Duel seems to share quite a few thematic and technical aspects with a lot of these films. Is that something that you agree with?
Well, yeah. I mean, if we think about so I've actually spent the last few weeks, for some reason, just watching a lot of like large studio pictures from like the early 60s.
Early
like
60s.
Funny Girl and West Side Story and like all these like, big musicals. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting to think that, especially watching something like Funny Girl, which was 1968, which is the Barbra Streisand, Don't Rain on My Parade movie. And watching that and how formal it is, how huge, massive lights on big studio sets, huge ensemble casts, these massive budgets. To think about the fact that came out within a few years, or sometimes in the same year, like Bonnie and Clyde, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Easy Rider, and Duel being, of course, a TV movie, but having a theatrical release after its success in Europe. That you look at what I thought was so interesting is like I can totally see why these movies took off and why this style of this like new wave Hollywood kind of blew up, and it's because it's so refreshing, it's so visceral, it's so real, it's and very much in the line with like what a lot of Spielberg his kind of famous, I guess, touches on movies is that the kineticism of these movies too, that you can feel this like constantly forward momentum of energy and of just this incredible technical craft and skill and immersion.
And it's interesting too. I just want to point out a couple, because there's some technical changes that happened that I think had a major impact on this change of look and feel. I mean, you mentioned Funny Girl, and it's interesting that you did, because Funny Girl was shot I'm pretty sure was that shot 70 millimeter. I know it was
65,
65, and it was Technicolor. And so, Technicolor was the premier color process. This is actually even kind of late. A lot of films had even switched from this to some of the Eastman Kodak film that was kind of, I don't want to speak out of turn, so I won't say the exact year, but, Eastman Kodak produced, much cheaper color process that didn't require, Technicolor is just an extremely expensive process. And so you've got Funny Girl, which is, 65 millimeter. It's Technicolor. It's this saturated. I mean, this, like you said, lit with, I can't even fathom what kind of like wattage you used to like. Right. Seriously. It's like you've got to have an entire coal power plant just to, power that set there. And then you move to this less saturated, cheaper Eastman Kodak film.
Where
You
films
moved,
were lit naturally.
lit more
Even you think about the
naturally.
diner scene in
It's
this, where it's like
faster
the light that's
film.
coming in the window is what's lighting Dennis Weaver.
Yep.
Conrad L. Hall, who's my personal favorite cinematographer, but he was like really one of the first American pioneers in terms of cinematography, of someone to go, I'm going to light this scene with one shot, with one light.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm literally just going to point a light at the actor. I'm going to bounce it around with some mirrors. I'm going to get some cool stuff that way. But
You're
like
moving
this,
away from like high key lighting,
yeah,
right? Which was so
yeah.
much a part of this older golden era of Hollywood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where everything is bright and beautiful, and
And you saw that move into TV much more. Like, that became the look of like
well, it
sitcoms
still is
and television. Yeah,
to
exactly.
great extent. That any kind of comedy or multi-camera show is almost always lit with that kind of high key kind of flatter light. But yeah, I mean, that's just, so there's technical things that are happening. There's budgetary things that are happening, right? Studios are saying, it's, if you don't have much money, you're going to go shoot at this cheaper film. You don't need, 5 Technicolor technicians there to, make sure that your color is going to come out right.
And studios are running out of money too. Like Hello Dolly, which I think came out a year after Funny Girl, was the next Barbra Streisand big musical, was a flop. It was a huge flop. And because I think, again, studios were just kind of like, what the hell do we do?
Well, and you've got baby boomers, right? So you've got, and look at all the things that are happening culturally too. At least, I'll speak to here in this country.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you've got the Vietnam War, you've got, political, you've got cynicism, you've got hippie movement, you've got civil rights movement, you've got, there's a lot of unrest, civil unrest and strife and struggle. There's a lot of things happening. I think, that like compression of the 50s is is now boiling over, and I think the art of that of New Hollywood is showing that, and I think these films are finding audiences. The baby boomer generation was gigantic, and so there's this huge audience for these films,
and the faith put into young directors like Coppola, Spielberg, Lucas, Scorsese, I think, and so one common sort of thing that is that this Duel is not actually Spielberg's first feature-length directing thing. He actually directed an episode of The Name of the Game, which was, each episode was about 90 minutes.
Oh, so that was okay.
But that was strictly a TV episode.
Right.
And again, when you look at that, very much that formalist TV style of like shot in studio, whereas this was really just like Spielberg and his crew running around the desert and shooting stuff very you had a really good word for it, which is that it was very run and gun.
It sure did seem it, yeah.
That it feels, and it sort of feels a lot like I was sort of making the comparison to Easy Rider, in the way that like there's the lens flares coming into the lens, that they're shooting directly into the sun, that it's they're not. These shots don't feel, when the truck comes up and is chasing Dennis Hopper, it doesn't feel like it was some grand, orchestrated, perfected, rehearsed movement. It felt like someone in the car with Dennis Weaver trying to get all this stuff on camera, that it's shaky, and because of that, it feels very visceral. It feels very, very real.
And immersive.
Very immersive, exactly. Great word for it. And like very much, and of course you're a huge Mad Max fan. That it starts to kind of bleed into that territory. Too.
It really it's very kinetic. Yeah, because I even being a huge Mad Max fan now, I have to admit to everyone out there, so I had actually not seen Duel before preparation for this podcast. I hadn't seen it. I thought I had, but I had actually seen Sugarland Express. So I get 2 minutes into this film and I'm like, wait a minute, I've never seen this. So I was quite surprised at how much of this film made me think of Mad Max and The Road Warrior. I was really surprised. But it had that so much of that visceral, dirty, kinetic, visceral feel to it. I was really impressed. I was quite surprised that this was a made-for-TV film, frankly.
Yeah, and it's what I think is also something that sort of comes up a lot in conversations about it, but I kind of want to emphasize is the like efficiency of the storytelling too.
Yeah.
That there's not time spent on getting to really know
There's no
Dennis Weaver's motivations or
Yeah.
his like that. It really is like you plop in, you know what you need to know about him.
No
There's
exposition.
no
Very
exposition,
little.
and from the villain of like you never even see the truck driver's face, except for a few glimpses, just probably accidentally when he's like driving, you can see them. But I think it's interesting that, you know, because I love the opening of this movie so much, where it's you just a first person perspective of the car, and like you can hear the radio. That I stole it for a short film I did 2 years ago, of just because I think that it's such a great world building thing of like it was like what a fantastically efficient way to get the themes of the movie in place by just having, you know, the opening credits roll over this guy going from his suburban, you know, home as like a businessman to driving through these, you know, you get the idea of the isolation that he's in.
Yeah.
That these roads are run
Leaving
down, that they're
city.
windy, they're not safe necessarily to drive at high speeds on.
Yeah.
But you're also getting this overrun kind of like overview of what this character does, and he's flipping back and forth between these radio stations, and you're getting these quite comedic kind of little segments of like the one man who's kind of emasculated by his wife because she's
this is huge,
the man
actually.
of the house, and
so
you can talk really well about this a little bit about the era.
One, not having seen the film before, right? This was one of the things that really first stuck out to me because of watching this, and I'm like, okay, you know, and of course, like like you described, this POV shot I thought was extremely efficient, a really, really efficient way of kind of showing us who this person is and where this is going to take place, and bring us to the set and setting of the action, which is so important. And I love the way that it showed this progression further and further away from civilization. I mean, this radio program, this talk show comes on the radio, and it's talking about census, and like a guy calls into this talk show and says, you know, starts talking, like you said, kind of comedically about, well, you know, should I put myself as the head of household? It's like, I'm the man, but I stay home and raise the kids, and my wife goes out and brings home the bacon. And he's like, I don't want to admit this. Like, what if my neighbors find out about this? And so, like, right off the bat, I get this extremely strong sense that there is that this is kind of a theme of this film, and I'm curious. I'm not quite sure what I think Spielberg is saying. I can't really quite tell if he has an opinion about this, frankly. But it
have come from the screenwriter, because
I don't know.
Didn't
right?
write it, of course, but
it's hard. But in the film, though, I can't quite tell if you know. There's a part of me that it's very interesting because, right, in this whole film, the main character is being, you know, he's basically like a mouse being chased by a cat, and it's kind of the whole process of this is quite emasculating for him. He doesn't have power, he doesn't have leverage, he doesn't have these things that are traditionally would be considered masculine. And we're looking at, you know, 1971. I think this is a time period when women are becoming more equal in the workplace. I mean, at least there's the beginning of this. They're working more. Feminism is, and you know, I'm not an expert on these things, but I think, you know, it was becoming more prominent, and women were more outspoken, and so maybe this was some kind of response to that. I don't know, but it really did stand out to me. It kind of reads pretty ridiculous today, in my opinion, almost to the point of kind of, I don't know.
It feels parody.
It feels really, it feels really, you know, out of place, and it feels pretty cheesy. But I think that it might speak to that era. And again, it was hard for me to tell what Spielberg's stance on that was. Did he agree? Did he felt like if a woman is working and a man isn't, is that what masculinity is? I mean, I think viewpoints, hopefully, at least for most of us, have changed. And that's not the case now. But yeah, it was interesting. And I felt like
even
that
just
was
like
a theme throughout it, you know?
Yeah, and that you know, our main character is driving this like bright red, you know, smaller Plymouth car, and he's being chased by this, you know,
huge giant
blue,
truck.
you know, very blue collar, huge giant truck that's this brown, dirty, rusty thing. And it's sort of, you know, even sort of getting away from Spielberg for a moment, perhaps and I haven't read up on this, but perhaps the intention with the the screenplay was this idea that it's like the old workman-like era is kind of being ushered out by this more business,
which is considered softer,
cleaner,
it's considered
softer, exactly,
less masculine, less manly, less macho.
And Dennis Weaver's by no means portrayed as some brave hero in this movie either. He's honestly kind of it's again it's comedic, sort of how almost cowardly he is in moments.
Almost,
but it doesn't. And his car doesn't go as fast, and
It doesn't seem to me that it's supposed. It doesn't seem to me though that it's supposed to be a parody.
Or mocking. It doesn't really feel necessarily like cynical in that way. It feels just kind of.
But it's just it's certainly a theme. I feel like, and so I think it'd be you could, in my opinion, make a very strong argument that this film is kind of about this person's emasculation, and it was almost kind of like, I don't know if you've seen that film, like Falling Down or something.
Yes.
You know, it almost kind of like reminded me of that
Schumacher
kind of film, right? In a certain sense, but so I just thought that was another thing that stood out to me, and I thought, I'd have to go back and kind of study this because I'm not a historian. I'm not quite sure exactly what the culture was regarding feminism in 1971, but it did definitely stand out to me as a theme for this episode, this film pretty strongly. So let's compare that then. So if we fast forward to 11 years to 1982, we have a very, very, very different film. Now Spielberg's 36.
He's kind of the biggest name in Hollywood.
He's like, if he isn't, I don't know who else is. Maybe Coppola at this point maybe had, but you've got, what films does he have under his belt now by this point?
So he did Sugarland next, then he did Jaws,
but
then
Jaws
he did
is
Close
huge.
Encounters.
Close Encounters is huge.
Later 1941,
Raiders,
which was a bit of a flop, but then he did Raiders, and now he's here on E.T. So
so he's got
definitely, kind of just a few notches in his belt.
Just a couple, just a couple. But you've got Jaws, which many people claim kind of is the beginning of the blockbuster era.
Invented really the blockbuster.
You've huge films, and of course E.T. itself went on to be mammoth, gigantic.
One of my favorite movies as a kid. Still, I think it's a very emotional movie. I think one thing that's interesting too, though, is that you look at just even the style that he uses for E.T. versus this, and I find it really interesting different. That he goes back to almost this formalism, that the shots in E.T. become very composed, the movements of the camera become very rehearsed, very accurate and articulate, much less of the handheld shakiness, zooms, and things like that we see in Duel.
But we stick with high contrast light.
We stick with a lot of those Spielbergisms and that new Hollywood sort of stuff that stuck around, which is exactly, no more huge studio lights.
A lot of
Alan
practicals.
Davia, who did the cinematography for E.T., just loved to like blast haze in the rooms. And
oh my gosh, it's so thick. It's so funny. I got it just real quick. It's in some of those. So you and I both mentioned this. We both talked about it. I mean, and if you haven't seen the film in a while, it might be hard to recall this, but I just finished watching it. I've got the 4K UHD disc release, so I watched it in that way on my OLED TV. And first of all, it looks just beautiful, beautiful. But there is so much haze in the interiors and all the nighttime exteriors.
Yeah, with the fog and the
such that in the interiors. In a lot of those shots at 4K, I can literally see the haze rolling out of the fog machine that must be like just off screen.
Yeah.
Because hilarious. I can literally it's like supposed to be a child's bedroom.
Well, that's in the one shot that always comes back to me is when Elliot fakes sick and wakes up in the morning and his mom goes out.
I'm like, no wonder you're sick.
And it's like the beams of light that are coming through his window because he's got the blinds closed.
It's like, Mom, I'm
stop
dying
smoking
of
in the house.
Pollution. It's like I can't breathe in this
Talk
house.
about smog alerts. But no, I think so. But I think that's a really good point, that the camera style went really, not returned to formalism in the sense that like it was, because it's very rare in those like 60s big budget studio kind of behemoth musicals and stuff like that to even see a close-up, other than like very few dialogue scenes where it was like, but even then the closest they got was really a medium close-up of,
there's quite a few close-ups
in
this film.
But in E.T., you know, it's a really interesting blend, and I think it really talks to the era of filmmaking that really took over in the 80s, which was this like kind of best of both worlds example of like, let's take the freedom and the realism of like new Hollywood, but let's combine that with the accuracy and the budgets of old Hollywood, and like get this, because of course E.T. undeniably much larger budget than Duel. You know, it's a few more dollars thrown in there.
Just a few.
But you look at just the like the way that those things, especially with Spielberg, the through lines of those things. That having been said,
I just want to pop in here real quick. Now, obviously, this is $81, but E.T.'s budget was still only $10.5 million.
Which is, I guess, I mean, I think of how much money goes to like CG these days, and it's mind-boggling.
I just want to pause on that for just a second. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
No.
I mean, so just think about that for a second, though. Now, obviously,
that's considered small budget now.
This is $1981, and so obviously we've had inflation, but and I don't want to like speak out of turn here, but I'm going to guess that 10 million in 81. That's 40 years ago, right?
Would be 26 million today.
So there you go. Now, that is not even remotely
large budget.
Large budget.
For comparison, I'm going to look up Pete's Dragon, which was a David Lowery kids movie.
Yeah.
And I'm going to look up Pete's Dragon budget. Came out in 2016. $65 million for Pete's Dragon, which was like very similar kind of content, which is,
Is it live action?
Yes, actually, it's David Lowery, who did Old Man and the Gun and Ghost Story and a few other things. I really like him as a director, but he did this kids movie, and but I just think it's interesting. It's a really interesting point that even nowadays, if you see a movie that's $10 million, that's like a Fox Searchlight or a Sony Pictures Classics. Like that's like a Lady Bird, kind of like one of those A24 movies. Likely have a lot of their budgets are, like. If I go to Uncut Gems, let's see what not to hark on budget, that was Uncut Gems had a $19 million budget. That's only really $5 million adjusted for inflation, less than E.T.
Yeah.
So that movie is very much seen as like a kind of like a very low budget, gritty
absolutely.
movie. So it is an interesting point that you make, and technically goes very well with what we were talking about our last episode, which was this idea that big movies didn't used to have huge budgets. Like they really didn't. And it goes back to that whole idea that I mentioned last time, which is like when I was a kid, and of course E.T. came out, 18 years before I was born.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, I grew up born in 98, grew up in the early 2000s. The movies that I was watching even then, a lot of like large movies that were out in theaters that were getting accolades and getting really big press attention, weren't huge budgets. They weren't $200-300 million. They were kind of similar. They were 20 to 30 million, maybe like 60 million was a big budget movie. But now it's insane how much movies are made for. But with that being said too, I think it's really interesting to look at the style of Spielberg that really carries on through his work. And it's like you see again this the shot that I mentioned to you before we were recording, but when Hopper runs out of not Dennis Hopper, Dennis Weaver. Always get those names confused. But when he runs out of the store, and it's like he's running after the truck as it pulls away, and it's like probably a 75-foot dolly track that dollies laterally with Weaver as he runs.
Right.
And it's such a Spielberg shot. Like it's such a shot that you look at and you go like, yeah, that's very much something that Spielberg loves to do, because then you watch E.T. and you get all these long dolly shots of them in the, I think of the one in the forest when they're on the bike right before he flies.
Yeah.
And you've got this cool dolly shot along with them. You've got, it's really interesting to me to see those through lines, because a lot of times there's some directors that really shift their style. Like they don't necessarily stick with the same style or use similar camera movements again and again.
I think Spielberg definitely grew, between these films. I mean, like you had talked about the kineticism of Duel. But one of the I thought there was such an extraordinary efficiency with movement in ET as well, but in a different way.
Maturity, much more mature. Yeah.
One of the things that really stood out with me on ET was that Spielberg would often not show the action as it was happening, but he would he would bring the camera to look the half second after the action took place. So you would.
So give me an example of that. What's
there were so
moment?
many places where now a lot of this is probably by necessity because of the limitations of special effects with E.T. with the creature, and we know that he's a smart guy. He didn't show us Jaws. I think he learned that on that film. But even in Duel, he knew. He's like, well, don't show the driver of the truck, right?
Yeah.
Keep that a mystery.
The truck is the villain.
The truck is the villain. And with Jaws, it was a focus on suspense, and it was like again, it was kind of necessity, but it worked out to be great. It was like, look, don't show the shark. Don't show the shark. Build that up to the very end. And with E.T., it's like you see like the trail that the action has left.
Yes,
the camera is almost like it's like almost like the camera's like a half second late,
Especially near the beginning of the picture when E.T. like runs off in the bushes and you see the bushes shaking.
And there's a ton of these little moments though where you see and we get to infer what's happened, and he invites us actively to be a part of the storytelling, and I think that is one of Spielberg's biggest assets as a filmmaker, and I think it really comes into his own on this film. I mean, not to say that he hadn't on previous films, but I mean, you really see it here. We're talking about E.T.
I think that his work with child actors in this movie is phenomenal.
Well, it's amazing. Yeah,
the performances that he gets out of these kids is
outstanding. Yeah.
I can honestly say I've never seen a movie since or before that where child actors. There's certainly been movies that had amazing child actors that have been made since, but the naturalness of the conversations of what's funny too is that I don't know how old your siblings are or your brother, but
30 or 34.
So you're the older sibling.
Yeah.
I was the younger sibling. I related so much to Elliot in this movie because I'm 4 years younger than my brother, which doesn't seem like much, but is a really big thing when you're growing up.
Sure.
And on the street that we lived, the street that I grew up on, all of the kids were my brother's age. So it was the exact, there's nothing that screams to me, this is my childhood, more than Elliot coming in on their card game, trying to be a part of it and being shooed off. It's like, go get the pizza. That was me. That's was literally my childhood growing up. They'd be playing GameCube downstairs or Nintendo 64 or whatever. I'd want to come play Mario Kart with them. And it was like, no, like, go get the pizza and maybe you can play a race.
Oh my
and it's
gosh.
like this exact, it's incredible how much
that worked.
Even my brother actually watched, this is probably 2 years ago now, but he watched it again, just casually and texted me after, and he was like, "You're literally the kid from E.T." It's just really funny to me.
I do find this to be really extraordinary. So I was, the movie came out in '82. I was 6 years old, and I saw it in the theater. And I made my parents take me. I think I saw it probably 5 times at the theater when I was a kid. And I was talking to my brother last night, and so my brother is 10 years younger than me. And he said that E.T. was a huge film for his childhood too, and then here you are,
echoing the same sentiment,
echoing that exact same sentiment, and you're 30 years off or whatever, not 30 years, 20 years. Sorry, you're not 12, but
little do you know.
But it's amazing to me how, and it's like, so I was an only child when I saw the film, and but I felt like, I mean, I had no problem, putting myself into that right position. But yeah, and I think my brother probably felt, some of the similar sentiments as you, because I probably would have been, I was like, my brother would come down into my room and be like, let's play Nintendo, and I'd be like, go get me a soda.
Yeah, well, even going beyond that too, like my parents divorced when I was very young. So growing up in this, like that was like, that's what I find so remarkable about the realism in which it portrays these family dynamics. And I think that's what's missing from so many. I kind of, in my circle of friends refer to it as like, it ushered in the Amblin era of family movies, which were these like realistic kind of family dramas that were masquerading as these family pictures. So like Mrs. Doubtfire, another one that nobody has ever seen this movie except for me, but one of my favorite movies as a kid, Magic in the Water.
Yeah, never
basically
heard
an
of
E.T. ripoff, but like it's set in like British Columbia.
I thought E.T. ripoff was Mac and Me.
That too. I never actually saw Mac and Me though. Never saw Mac and Me. But it's this like I call it the Amblin kind of era, Free Willy similar, where it's like this family drama about this like orphaned kid who, very much a family drama, but masquerading as this like family kind of extraordinary, somewhat hinging on the supernatural, relationship with this whale, and it's like this is the same thing where you get the sci-fi elements in this family. So I think that's really the brilliance of it, is that especially growing up watching E.T. and being able to point to it and not only say like, hey, that kid's he's a 10-year-old boy, I relate to that, but like the dynamics of his siblings, the dynamics of his parents being so my dad didn't go off to Mexico, but so true and so real to me as a kid.
Well, I know that Spielberg has said that, and I think maybe he says this still today. I know he has at some point, so I don't know if he would still say this, but I know he's said in the past that this is his most personal film.
And he describes it as a response to Close Encounters too, because he says that the ending of Close Encounters, where the main character, whatever his name is, walks off with the Richard Dreyfuss is the actor, of course, but Mr.
Holland's opus,
walks off with the aliens, like leaves his family, basically abandons his family and goes off.
Right.
And he said that Spielberg has always said that ending really bothered him.
Yeah.
And that, so he remade the ending really but it's about family, it's about friendship, it's about the everlasting kind of, and we kind of again discussed this a little bit before we were recording, but the idea that he it's not goodbye, like it's not, even though he may never see E.T. again, that like this idea that friendship can transcend space and time, and that you'll always remember him. And it's what's funny too is that there was a planned sequel, not directed by Spielberg, but there was plans for a sequel to come out.
Were there? I heard that the studio kind of pushed, and Spielberg even tried briefly to come up with some story ideas that he might consider worthy, and that Spielberg said he couldn't come up with any ideas, and so he said, look, the film is perfect, let's leave it at that. And the studio agreed, but you're saying there was development too. I don't think it was ever like in serious development, but the plot was going to be that E.T. comes back to Elliot when he's like a teenager, and Elliot wants nothing to do with him. It's just that would suck. I'm just
like
so glad
my alien friend comes back. I'm too cool for you, E.T.
I know, right? Like... You just like traversed, like the galaxy. And I'm not going to be. Yeah, I'm so glad.
Which seems very much like something that would have come out in the late '80s, early '90s.
It does,
but
I'm so glad they didn't do that.
And I just there's this, like, even I saw one of my favorite experiences I've had watching a movie was I saw E.T. in 2016, I think, with a live orchestra. So it was like a real orchestra playing with the movie. It was at the it was called the Sony Center back then. It's called something else now, but in Toronto. So huge venue, like big, like 100-person orchestra.
That's
like, beautiful,
cool.
Beautiful experience. But like the moments of sadness in this movie are genuinely sad. Like
oh my gosh, yeah, dude, I was about to cry.
And it's
I was just watching.
Like, oh my god,
I just watched it for this podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, like
that reaction when E.T. dies and Drew Barrymore just like doesn't know what to do. That it's heartbreaking, and what I find it so. I remember, and this is kind of more of an anecdote. But I think what's so interesting with this movie too is that everyone has kind of personal stories related to it.
Yeah.
And there was this YouTube guy that was like probably back in 2010 that used to do all these he was like reviewing
YouTube
all
guy.
of Spielberg's, that's what his name's, YouTube guy. I can't remember I think Don Pfeff was his name, and I think I don't know where he is now.
No,
but
like
he had
YouTube guy.
Yeah, YouTube guy, he had probably like 1,000 subscribers, was not big by any means, but I stumbled across his channel somehow and was watching. He was doing this like all he was going through all of Spielberg's movies and reviewing them all. And his E.T. one was the longest. Like most of his reviews were 20 minutes. His E.T. one was like 45 minutes. And the reason was because he was talking about how him and a really close childhood friend of his like loved like they watched E.T. They kind of bonded over E.T. and they felt like a really strong friendship over this idea, like, oh, maybe an alien will come to visit us. Yeah. And his friend, he was probably, I think he said he was like 8 or 9 when this happened. And in the years after it came out, a year or so later, his friend got ill. I don't know with what, but died.
Oh.
And so he discusses this, like, that E.T. is a movie that he rarely watches, not because he doesn't like it, but that because it's such a, like, impactful movie to him that he can't.
Too emotional.
Yeah, like, he watches it and he just turns into a blubbering mess when he watches it. And I just remember watching that, and again, it's what I think is so remarkable, that it's literally a kids movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of impact, you know, what kids movie has come out in the past 20 years that has had anywhere near the impact on people's lives that this did? You know,
Well,
that's what I think is so remarkable about it.
Probably Harry Potter films. I think, like,
sure, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, if you put yourself into the mind.
But even then, like, it would be the
yeah.
earlier Harry Potter movies, and even then, I would say that those movies don't.
Look,
really
I'm not
have...
arguing that they're as good as E.T. Trust me, I'm
no,
not arguing.
But
that.
I mean, they don't even have, to me. And I grew up with those movies as well, but they don't really have the emotional toll, especially like the earlier ones. I think are the good ones.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of fall apart near the end. But but I think that's even Harry Potter. I would say that's a really good example of something that got close.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like, in terms of shaping lives, and I mean, of course, there are people who are super fans of Harry Potter, just like Star Wars. But I think just from the content alone, just from the emotional subject matter of the content, right. I don't really think there's anything like E.T. I don't think there's anything arguably that might ever be made again. And again, I talk, like, about my love for these Amblin type movies, which is like, you know, Mrs. Doubtfire, Free Willy.
And even beyond that, I mean, we talked a little bit, you know, it's, you know, again, to kind of like examine the landscape a little bit to contrast it. I mean, we barely touched on it, but, you know, the difference of 1971 and 1982, it's not just that E.T. is one of the first films of this, you know, exploding blockbuster era. I mean, we really see a reshaping of what films are produced, how they're released, audience taste. I mean, we're seeing a big shift here. But, you know, we also see something interesting, I think, I would say, you know, it's not like this is the first film, but it was, I think, in the first couple of years of this happening. But these, I don't know how to say it, but like teen-centered films, right? Or kid-centered films. So, and you drawn a distinction. I think it's important. It's not family films, but it's films where the main characters are kids or teenagers, and they're not looked down upon necessarily.
Yeah, like they swear and they're portrayed realistically.
Right. And so you've got films, you know, everything from, you can kind of bracket it for, you know, it's like you have films that are like Goonies, which are still pretty much like family friendly, but, you know, they're treating the children as actual human beings and main characters. And then, you know, on the other side too, you have Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You even have films like Porky's. You've got
even
Animal
like
House
Empire of the Sun, which is another Spielberg movie that was kind of Christian Bale's big break, but it's very much centered on him as a kid in the Second World War.
And I don't think there were a ton of those before. I don't think there were a lot of films that were centered around, you know, children or teenagers or adolescents being main characters. And so I think this kind of was a big part of that shift. And
you know what I think is actually interesting about you having mentioned Harry Potter?
Mm-hmm.
I think the most, even though Christopher Columbus, who like did Home Alone, which is, you know, arguably sort of a similar stature of that type of thing, the kid in Home Alone.
Right. Hughes wrote it and Columbus directed it. Is that right? For the first one? Okay.
And so, but you look at, and I think they both returned actually for the second. Columbus definitely did. And I think John Hughes wrote the second as well. But
I know that was right near the end of his career.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you mentioned Harry Potter because so Christopher Columbus directed the first two, and then Cuarón directed the third. Of Prisoner of Azkaban, which I think is the best Harry Potter movie, but that is because it is done in that style. And I think where you lose it with the fourth and onwards of Harry Potter is that you get into this kind of modern era of like young adult novels where it's like, oh, we're seriously cool. We're like action movies.
What was the vampire one?
The Mortal Instruments. Oh,
Twinkle?
Twilight.
God.
Yeah. So
I mean, these are all films.
And so that's what I found the later Harry Potter movies kind of got into. But the third one especially really stuck with this kind of amplification. Like I say Amblin because of course that's Spielberg's company.
Yeah.
But
and
his
first film.
This real and his first exactly. And you get this realistic approach of of childhood. And I think it's really funny again that you did mention Harry Potter, because again that those first three really do follow that formula.
Wow, I couldn't speak to it. I've seen the Harry Potter films, but I have not seen them in so long. And I have to be honest, they did not make a substantial impact on me.
Yeah, no, me again. I grew up in the ripe era to love those movies, and I never really was super interested in them. But three was the one that really, like, three is actually very very good. But no, I think it's interesting that this this era of films, like movies that you could bring the whole family to see, but that aren't pandering, that they're not going to the,
well, I think Spielberg clearly, I mean, people have talked about this forever, I mean, this is something that every film critic who's ever even, tossed a casual glance Spielberg's way has noted that he, really does have, his, especially in his early work, that the child inside of him was, he had such ready access to that. And you talked about, working with actors, eliciting, amazing performances from young actors. I think that's a big part of it. You watch the BTS stuff, of which there's about at least an hour of on the E.T. disc, and maybe on YouTube or other places where it's just, kind of raw BTS footage of Spielberg. And a lot of it is of him working with the actors. And you can really see, I mean, he had an extraordinary rapport. Really had an amazing intuition about how to work with these kids. But even with, the content, with the writing, with I mean, he really did know how to tap into, like, the heart of children. He really did.
And to make things such to a degree, like, kids movies before E.T. were movies that I would say adults didn't have interest in. That like, as a parent, you wouldn't really pay attention. Or it was kind of a slog to bring your kid to go see it, because it was like,
right,
I'm gonna have to sit through this, this cartoon or this silly, like, movie about some, dancing orphans or something.
Yeah.
Not that I don't like Oliver Twist, but then,
well, I thought when you said dancing orphans, I thought you were talking about Annie.
Oh, Annie too. Yeah, there you go. But then you get to this point of Spielberg, which is like, not only is the movie good just from a technical standpoint, like, not only is it well made, well produced, but it's accessible to such a wide variety of people.
Yeah.
That, like, you can be a parent and go into this and relate to the dynamics of, like, a mother wanting to protect her kids. You can be a kid and go into this and relate to the idea of, like, this school. I mean, even when I visited you in California, I remember one of the first things I said when we were in your neighborhood was, I was like, your neighborhood reminds me of E.T.
Yeah,
it's got that
does.
those wide streets, those rolling kind of, California hills and Southern
we live
California.
in a very similar looking place. Yes.
And
yeah.
But it, to for me to think about that, to make a movie that is, family friendly, that is sort of centered on kids, and have it have such a cultural impact is really, and to me, it really has inspired me a lot as a filmmaker, because I also realize, like, there's a lot of times when people really want to go to the extra mile of cynicism, and they want to go to the extra mile of, like, violence and drama. And I remember a friend of mine and I were writing this short a few years ago, and it was like, he wrote the first draft and then asked me to basically do, like, a punch-up revision of it. And one of the things that I talked to him about while we were doing it was, I was like, can I take out, like, all of the adult stuff? Like, can I just strip it of, like, the really, really adult-oriented content that would make it kind of like an R rating, kind of like the more, like, gritty, violent, lots of swearing and stuff like that. And I was like, can I strip that away? If you don't like it, we can go back to it. But let me try and turn this into something that's a lot more sort of Amblin-esque, which is like this, like, that it's still, like, there's still, like, a little bit of swearing. There's still kind of these like more mature themes, but at the same time, it's got, like, a really nice message to it. It's got this, like, it's really sort of heartwarming at the end. It's very emotional. The movie's never been made just because it would require a budget, but no, I remember, like, thinking about that and kind of thinking back to this idea of just, like, you can make content that children can see, that doesn't also shy away from more serious topics.
And I think it's like I think, yes, it's like it's real, so it's emotionally real.
Yeah.
And there is like, and so that realness to it is like, kids use certain language and, in real life and all these kind of things. So it has like a realness to it, but it's not, it doesn't have like mean intentions. It doesn't have like the heart is in a good, like you feel like all of these films, like I'm going back and I'm looking at all of these Amblin movies, and everything from Poltergeist to Gremlins, Goonies, Back to the Future. I mean, Inner Space, so many of these films, I had forgotten how many films they had produced. I mean, they do get into a little bit, like for instance, in 91, they actually produced Cape Fear, which is a little bit of an anomaly if you look at
which was originally supposed to be Spielberg, too, that did it.
Yeah.
He swapped out on that for Schindler's List with Scorsese. But
and we have films like Saving Private Ryan, which are quite different. But, yeah, I mean, for the most part, there's like this goodness. I don't know if like a better way to say
I would almost say like it's like genuine. Like again, I refer to it as this,
but
like
goodness too.
There's this idea that there's no cynicism to it.
Yes,
and I like that it's not taking the subject matter
hard.
And like mocking it or being cynical about like the truth of life and stuff like that. That's a good even down to Schindler's List, which is arguably probably Spielberg's like most difficult movie to watch. And I know that it gets a lot of criticism for people. Like I know Haneke said, like Michael Haneke said that it was like too happy at the end, which I don't find. I don't think it's a very happy ending. But I don't think I've never really been one to punish Spielberg for like the sentimentality that he has, or just the idea, like the general optimism that he tends to put into a lot of his movies. I've always just kind of been like, it's somewhat of a nice break sometimes because so many movies are very nihilistic or very cynical.
They are.
Sometimes it's nice to kind of, watch a movie and be like, that made me feel good.
And you know what? Yeah. And you know what? I feel like I feel the same way about podcast. Sometimes it's nice to just have a podcast where when you get to the end of it, you just feel good.
I hope so.
and I hope that's what everybody out there listening, if you've made it this far in, I hope that you feel good.
Yeah.
So I know that I do, having had this conversation. I always enjoy these discussions, Colin, and I look forward to where we go next now that we have expanded our horizons.
Yeah, the sky's the limit, baby,
and our options. So it'll be fun to see what we decide to go to next. But thank you so much, everybody, for hanging in there with us. We hope we enjoyed it. And Colin, until next time, everyone, take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.